President Trump says there'll be hell to pay. With his cabinet firmly in place, President Trump has really put his focus on his foreign policy. Even though there's 50 more days until the inauguration, President Trump is making moves. He's out there meeting with foreign leaders like Justin Trudeau, and we have an update on that story. He's out there making moves with foreign leaders in Europe and trying to rebuild coalitions and also let them know who's boss. And he's also laying down the law with some of our enemies and some of our adversaries all over the globe. Not just Putin in Ukraine, but also Hamas and Hezbollah in the Middle East. President Trump on Truth Social yesterday wrote, "Everybody is talking about the hostages who are being held so violently, inhumanely, and against the will of the entire world in the Middle East. But it's all talk and no action. Please let this truth serve to represent that if the hostages are not released prior to January 20th, 2025, the date that I proudly assume office as President of the United States, there will be all hell to pay in the Middle East. And for those in charge who perpetrated these atrocities against humanity, those responsible will be hit harder than anybody has been hit in the long and storied history of the United States of America. Release the hostages now." I should point out, by the way, that all hell to pay and release the hostages now were written in traditional Donald Trump all caps. So Donald Trump is saying there needs to be an end to this hostage situation in the Middle East. We don't need to wait for Inauguration Day. And this comes after another hostage was found dead, confirmed dead, that Hamas had taken on October 7th. This is well over a year now that these people have been held hostage. There have been multiple fatalities, and some have been released, some have not. Those that have been released have been horribly treated. And President Trump is saying enough is enough. We all know also that when President Trump says something, when he lays down the law, he can back it up. We all remember what happened to General Soleimani in Iraq, who was bombed by a drone and was obliterated from the earth. He was, of course, the head of ISIS. Also, ISIS itself was taken out by President Trump in about 2 weeks after he gave the order to his generals on the ground in the Middle East. So if the hostages are not released by Hamas of their own free will, there will be, quote, all hell to pay, according to President Donald Trump, not just for the soldiers who perpetrated this horrible crime, but for the leaders who gave the order in the first place and have kept these hostages in captivity for oh so long. President Trump is not one to mince words. We know that. And we know that he is, again, working around the clock to make sure that on day one, he will probably be able to claim that he has effectively completed more tasks or done more good for this country in one single day because of his preparations. He's not just putting a cabinet in place and trying to get new stationery and making sure that the drapes are the right length and that he gets all his photos back on his desk of Kaye and the rest of his grandkids. No, what he's trying to do is he's trying to make sure that everything is set in stone. Everything's ready to go so that on day one, he can sign pardons for January 6th protesters. On day one, he can sign orders opening up the strategic, drilling all over the country, making sure that we're drilling, making sure that the border is secure. He can shut down the border. He can rebuild the wall. He can get that XL pipeline going again. There's all sorts of orders and presidential executive orders that he's going to sign on day one. But there's also military actions that he's ready to take. And he's warning, he's firing a shot across the bow. You take this truth. Please let this truth serve to represent that if the hostages are not released prior to January 20th, 2025, the date that I proudly assume office, there will be all hell to pay. This is now Donald Trump taking his Truth Social platform and using it as a weapon against our enemies. And I imagine it'll be a pretty effective one. There's also more news. Donald Trump has accepted an invitation from President Emmanuel Macron of France to attend the ceremony at the reopening of the cathedral at Notre Dame. He wrote on Truth Social, "It is an honor to announce that I will be traveling to Paris, France on Saturday to attend the reopening of the magnificent and historic Notre Dame Cathedral, which has been fully restored after a devastating fire 5 years ago. President Emmanuel Macron has done a wonderful job ensuring that Notre Dame's a university in Indiana. Notre Dame has been restored to its full level of glory, and even more so. It will be a very special day for all. You may remember 5 years ago, as President Trump reminds us, there was that tragic fire that devastated the Cathedral of Notre Dame. So many historic artifacts and so much of the historic architecture ruined. It has been rebuilt. It has been redeemed by President Macron and all of the other forces in France that worked diligently to put it all together. And President Trump he said he's excited to travel to France. He's going, I imagine him with a red beret, smiling, with a MAGA beret, standing in front of the Cathedral of Notre Dame with Emmanuel Macron just laying down the law. Now, it's interesting. The interesting thing about this invitation is that it shows that not only is President Trump rip-roaring and ready to go to reestablish himself as the leader of the free world, but it seems like the other leaders in the free world are rip-roaring and ready to go to accept President Donald Trump at his right position atop the New World Order. Macron's Paris invite shows power fast flowing from Biden to Trump, writes CNN, which I'm sure was a very difficult headline for them to write. There'll be a strong sense of deja vu when French President Emmanuel Macron lays the flattery on thick for Donald Trump in Paris this weekend. A few foreign leaders did more to woo Trump when he was the 45th president. In fact, Macron treated him with such deference at a Bastille Day parade on the Champs-Élysées that Trump came home wanting a military parade of his own on July 4th. I remember that. I'm shocked that we didn't get it. As Trump prepares to become the 47th president, Macron has surpassed him, inviting Trump to attend the year's most vaunted opening, the unveiling of the newly restored Notre Dame Cathedral 5 years after a savage fire. Putting Trump at the center of the star-studded VIP event, which will mark his big return to the global stage, says everything about the power fast flowing back to the president-elect 6 weeks before he begins his second term. Trump isn't waiting until January to launch his new foreign policy. He's already threatened a trade war with Canada and Mexico and showed who his boss when Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau rushed to Florida to appease him last week. And on Monday, of course, we just reported he warned there will be all hell to pay in the Middle East if Hamas doesn't release hostages in Gaza before Inauguration Day. Trump's starring role in Paris will also mark a poignant contrast with Joe Biden's increasingly ignominious long goodbye. The president came under fierce criticism Monday, even from within his own party, after he pardoned his son Hunter, undercutting a core principle of his term that everyone is equal before the law. So while Joe Biden is out hiding in Angola in Africa because he pardoned his son and basically annoyed everybody in his own party and gave President Trump the carte blanche to pardon whomever he wants, Donald Trump will be center stage. I mean, this is the VIP event of the year. This is an event that's been 5 years in the making, and the Cathedral at Notre Dame, everyone will be watching. Joe Biden will not be there. President Donald Trump will be. On a side note, an interesting twist: the Pope will not attend the reopening of Notre Dame Cathedral. The Sarajevo Times says Pope Francis will visit the French Mediterranean island of Corsica on December 15th, just days after the reopening of Paris's Notre Dame Cathedral, but he will not attend the event, which is a little bizarre. Pope Francis, 87, has declined the invitation and will instead travel to Ajaccio, the capital of Corsica, for a conference on Catholicism in the Mediterranean, the Vatican said. The star of the Notre Dame reopening ceremony is Notre Dame itself, said Eric de Moulin-Beaufort, head of the French Bishops' Conference, adding that the Pope did not want his presence to distract from the essence of the event. That's kind of a bizarre thing for the Pope to not attend the reopening of the Notre Dame Cathedral, especially at the request or the invitation of the Archbishop of Paris. But he decided that it's not in his best interest. Is it that he feels that he will overshadow the event, or does he feel that perhaps maybe Donald Trump will overshadow him? I don't know. It's just conjecture at this time. A couple of other stories that I did want to come back to is the story with Hunter Biden. Hunter Biden and this pardon, that there's still ramifications, and this is something. The toll of this pardon is loud, and it has traveled far. And the ramifications still are lingering, even a couple of, a good 48 hours after the pardon was signed by President Joe Biden. And this is something that is very telling and very interesting, because President Donald Trump himself predicted this pardon by Joe Biden of his son Hunter. And this is a clip that has popped back up. This is something that President Trump, I believe it was earlier this year, they began a discussion about the weaponization of government and all of the bogus court cases that were brought against President Donald Trump. He was talking about how he had he didn't want to go after Hillary Clinton because she was the wife of a president, also Secretary of State. He thought it would be in bad form. And then, of course, they turned around and came right after him. But he mentioned the Hunter Biden situation, and he predicted exactly what President Joe Biden did.
What they've done is use the FBI and they've used the Department of Injustice to go after their political opponent, and it has never been done in this country. And people say, am I going to do that? And the answer is no, I don't want to do that. It's so bad for the country. The precedent they've set is so bad for our country. But I could have done it with Hillary, and certainly you do it with Hunter or whatever, but I don't want to do it with Hunter either. And I'll bet you the father probably pardons him. Let's see what happens. But he's a bad boy. There's no question about it. But I don't want to hurt people.
He's a bad boy. There's no question about it. President Trump, I bet the father pardons him. Let's just see what happens. That is correct on both accounts. He is a bad boy, and the father did pardon him, and that has been a thorn in the side of the Democrat Party. And again, not an unexpected turn of events from the Republicans, and a welcome precedent, because now, after all of the pardons that Donald Trump had for the people that he felt were unfairly treated, not family members, but friends and cabinet members who were attacked and who were investigated and who were prosecuted and who were imprisoned for things they did that Donald Trump felt were just within the course of their day, of their abilities or their responsibilities to the United States of America. Those people were attacked by the left, by their political adversaries, and they were imprisoned. And now Hunter Biden walks away scot-free simply because his father signed that pardon, something that President Donald Trump predicted would happen a few months ago. There's another story about Justin Trudeau. Now, this is an interesting turn of events, and we discussed this yesterday, how Justin Trudeau, the Prime Minister of Canada, shocked and petrified and scared of what would happen if Donald Trump levied the 25% tariff that he threatened against Canada because they were so lackadaisical in protecting the border and stopping the flow of drugs from Canada into the United States. Donald Trump was so beside himself with the activity or the lack of activity from Mexico and Canada, the taking advantage of this country for years, which they've done. They did it before Donald Trump was president the first time. They did it after he left office. Joe Biden, they saw as a doormat. They walked all over him. So did Mexico. The illegals and the drugs and everything else poured into this country. And Donald Trump said, look, enough is enough, and I'm not waiting until January 20th. You've got the opportunity now to stop this. You've got the opportunity now to talk to people. You've got the opportunity now to help the United States become great again, become safe again. And if you don't do it, I'm going to levy a 25% tariff on your country. So Justin Trudeau flew to Mar-a-Lago for dinner, and we're now getting new reports of exactly what happened and exactly what was said when they met. Here is Fox News' Peter Doocy with the inside scoop on President Trump's comments to Justin Trudeau.
And tonight we're getting some new details about that Trump-Trudeau dinner from two people who were at the table. We are told that when Trudeau told President-elect Trump that new tariffs would kill the Canadian economy, Trump joked to him that if Canada can't survive without ripping off the U.S. to the tune of $100 billion a year, then maybe Canada should become the 51st state and Trudeau could become its governor. Brett.
We'll have more on that detail with the panel. Peter, thank you.
Brett Baer, by the way, is choking back a grin, trying to keep from smiling or showing any kind of emotion whatsoever, even though he was about to laugh out loud at those comments. President Donald Trump is telling Justin Trudeau, the Prime Minister of Canada, look, bro, if you got trouble, if you think that a 25% tariff is going to devastate Canada, if that's a problem for you, then I've got a solution. We can annex your entire country. Canada can become the 51st state, and I'll even let you be the governor. This is foreign policy under Donald Trump. This is how Donald Trump handles foreign leaders. Donald Trump doesn't cut corners. Donald Trump doesn't mince words. Donald Trump doesn't, placate anybody. Donald Trump is not going to be the guy that is going to, not play nice, but he's not going to sugarcoat anything. if you've got a problem with tariffs, maybe you've mismanaged your country. And if you want me to take care of it, we'll just make Canada the 51st. It would be the largest state by far. It would really, but making Canada the 51st state would do a lot of amazing things. For example, if you had baseball games between the Toronto Maple Leafs and American teams, there would no longer have to be international travel plans. Same with hockey. It would make a centralized hockey and baseball contingent and conglomerate that wouldn't require, passports for players to go back and forth. You would also reconnect Alaska to the United States, and all of a sudden, Alaska would be part of the continental United States, and Hawaii would be the only outlier until, of course, AOC builds that underwater train she wanted to build or something to Hawaii. So there's a lot of good things, and then of course our land, we would be the largest country in the world geographically. We would be the largest country in the world. I mean, the oil, just forget about it. The amount of oil, untapped oil reserves in Canada would make us the largest oil producer in the entire world. We would dwarf the Middle East. We would dwarf Russia and Venezuela and all these other oil production companies. So there is a lot of benefit to it. And as Donald Trump pointed out nicely, he would allow Justin Trudeau to remain governor of the newly formed state. I don't know if that's going to happen, but but we'll see. Well, you never know with Donald Trump what could, and again, no idea is a bad idea when it comes to brainstorming. There's one more story that I wanted to share before we wrap up for the day, because as I said, it's always a busy day. And when we sit down and we accumulate all these stories, when we get these news items from President Trump's transition team, what we try to do, and this is important, we try to get just the news about President Trump directly from President Trump, directly from his team, directly from the communications department. We don't want any fluff. We don't want it gone. We would, push through the spin cycle of the mainstream media. We're getting you the direct information solely about President Donald Trump every single day, from the White House to my mouth to your ears for the next 4 years. That is the 47 Daily Podcast. But there is one thing that I wanted to share with you that comes from The View, and it is another pseudo apology, another legal note. In fact, this is the second legal note in as many weeks that The View has had to stop their broadcast for to read. Why? Because they baselessly attack President Trump's cabinet nominees. It began with Matt Gaetz when he was still the nominee for Attorney General, and The View had to issue an apology from their legal department. And now it's Pete Hegseth, who is President Trump's nominee for Secretary of Defense. The View, and they should have a graphic for this or something. They should come up with some kind of jingle. This should be a regular segment. Legal notes and apologies from The View, because they had to issue a legal note about Pete Hegseth and some unsubstantiated claims they made about him the other day.
I see you. I see you over there.
I have a very quick statement.
It's not going to be that quick.
Pete Hegseth has denied any wrongdoing. His lawyer said he paid the woman in 2023 to head off the threat of a baseless lawsuit. No charges were ever brought.
You rushed me for that? We'll be right back.
Yeah, that is going to be a regular segment on The View from now on, because President Trump has chosen some of the most effective, some of the most loyal, some of the most unconventional, and when it comes to Washington, D.C., outliers. And when you're the mainstream media or the Washington elite, the one thing you hate is an outsider or an outlier. You hate somebody who's not part of your club. You hate somebody whose skeletons are not buried in your backyard. You hate somebody that you do not share secrets with. Because the only way that Washington elitists can remain in power and continue to protect themselves is if they all know where each other's bodies are buried, if they all know which skeletons are in whose closet. And when you bring in someone like Pete Hegseth, when you bring in someone like Tulsi Gabbard, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., when you bring in Pam Bondi, when you bring in Kash Patel, all of a sudden, that power that people get from knowledge and information and secrets that have been kept for decades, that power no longer works. Now there's a new power in town, and it's President Trump's cabinet. It's the truth. It's justice. It's the American way. And we're all Very excited about it. Listen, if you enjoyed this podcast, make sure you check out our noon podcast, which is a larger, longer commentary form podcast. We will be chatting later today with Randy Fine, who was hand-selected by President Trump to take over or to run for the congressional seat in Florida's District 6, which was vacated by Mike Waltz when he became National Security Advisor to President Donald Trump. We'll hear from Randy Fine. We'll talk about his plans. We'll see why he wants to be the congressman. I mean, other than the fact that Donald Trump basically told him he would be. That's coming up a little later on today on Mark Kaye Saves the Republic. So if you have not yet downloaded and subscribed to our second podcast every day, please do so. It's at noon Eastern, 11 Central. You can get it wherever you download your podcasts. Download, listen, and enjoy.